Can you imagine being told your entire life that you're just less important, less worthy, always an afterthought? And then, when you finally prove everyone wrong, the very people who dismissed you come crawling back, begging for help? Oh, the sweet, sweet irony. This isn't just about money. It's about a lifetime of feeling invisible and the moment karma finally decided to settle the score. My name is Michael, I'm 27, and I guess you could say I've spent my entire life being overlooked. I have two siblings, my older sister, Sarah, and my younger brother, Chris. To call them the golden children would be a massive understatement. It was like they could never do anything wrong in my parents' eyes. Me? I was just there. Growing up, Sarah was the perfect student. Straight A's, all the activities, then off to some fancy Ivy League college. My parents were obsessed. From the day she got her acceptance letter, they wouldn't stop talking about it. They threw her this massive celebration party. Seriously, it felt like a second Christmas, just for her academic success. Chris? He barely had to try. Things just fell into place for him. He followed in Sarah's footsteps, got into a fancy grad school. My parents made sure everything was set up. Tuition covered, help moving, a new laptop, you name it. Then there was me. I didn't get into an Ivy League. I went to a state college. It was a good school, but I could feel that it wasn't something my parents would brag about like they did with Sarah and Chris. When I told them I got in, they just kind of nodded. That's great, Michael. Their hearts weren't in it. No celebration. No party. I was lucky if we even ordered takeout that night. I tried not to let it bother me, but the older I got, the more I noticed the stark difference. It wasn't just the attention. It was the money, too. Sarah's wedding? $200,000. No joke. My parents went all out. The venue, the catering, the dress, everything. It was the event of the century. They even flew family in from out of state. For Chris, they paid for his entire graduate degree and helped him with rent until he got on his feet. My youngest sister, Emily, didn't even have to worry about student loans. They covered those too. And me? When I was starting my career, I needed some essential tools for my work just to get going. I asked my parents for help. They gave me $7,000. Now, don't get me wrong, $7,000 is a lot of money. But when you compare it to $200,000 for a wedding or covering all of someone's tuition, it stings. It felt like I was getting the bare minimum, just so they could say they helped. It wasn't just the money, though. Every time we got together, I felt like the odd one out. At family dinners, all the conversation revolved around Sarah's fancy job or Chris's latest achievement. They'd talk about their vacations, new house upgrades, or whatever expensive thing they were planning next. I'd sit there, picking at my food, trying to think of something to contribute. But what was I going to say? Hey, I just finished a big project at work, and I'm still paying off my car. My achievements felt like tiny potatoes compared to theirs. I remember this one dinner, maybe a year ago. We were all sitting around the table, and the conversation, as usual, turned to Sarah's latest vacation plans. Oh, we're going to Europe for a few weeks. It's just so nice that Mom and Dad are able to help out with the expenses, she said, casually sipping her drink like it was nothing. Chris chimed in, talking about some wedding expenses. I don't know what we would have done without that $200,000, honestly, he said, all nonchalant. Emily laughed about how glad she was that tuition hikes didn't affect her, thanks to our parents covering everything. I just sat there trying to focus on my plate, but their words were drilling into my brain. It wasn't just the money. They had been handed their futures on a silver platter. Meanwhile, I had to claw my way up, take out loans just to get by. Every dollar felt like a struggle, while they acted like they didn't even have to worry. And the worst part? No one even seemed to notice. I wasn't part of the conversation. My frustration built. My face got hot. My hands clenched under the table. I couldn't keep it in anymore. Must be nice, I muttered under my breath. The room went quiet. All eyes on me. Sarah was the first to speak. What's that supposed to mean, Michael? She had this mix of confusion and annoyance, like she couldn't even begin to understand why I was upset. I took a deep breath trying to stay calm, but it just all came out. It means that not all of us get everything handed to us on a silver platter. Some of us actually have to work for what we need. They didn't get it. Chris just shrugged. leaning back in his chair. Michael, you're always acting like you're the victim, he said with that smirk of his. Didn't Mom and Dad help you get those tools for work? That hit a nerve. Sure, $7,000. But compared to everything else? It felt like crumbs. Yeah, they helped, I said, the bitterness impossible to hide. $7,000 compared to hundreds of thousands? It's not the same, and you know it. Mom tried to smooth things over. Michael, we thought that's what you needed. We've always tried to give you what was fair. Fair? How was $7,000 fair? Fair. I practically spat. You think this is fair? You've given them everything. You've practically paved their roads for them. I've had to build mine brick by brick. The conversation spiraled. Everyone trying to defend themselves, trying to make it seem like I was being dramatic. You're blowing this out of proportion, Dad said, shaking his head. Needed. I scoffed. No, they gave me the bare minimum. That's what hurt the most. They didn't care about what I wanted, only what they thought was enough to keep me quiet. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. I left the room. Without another word. Their voices trailed behind me as I walked out the door. I didn't look back. I was done being the forgotten one. The one who always got the leftovers. When I stormed out of that house, I was fuming. I don't think I've ever been that mad. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free. Every step I took felt like the world was closing in. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away. Far away. It was late, probably close to 10 p.m. The streets were quiet. That eerie kind of quiet where everything feels too still. The only sound was my shoes hitting the pavement. I didn't have my phone out, no headphones. I wasn't in the mood for distractions. I needed to think. As I walked, that dinner replayed in my head on a loop. Chris's smug face, Sarah's condescending questions. It was like they lived in this bubble of privilege, completely oblivious to how suffocating it was for me. They were in their happy little world, and I was just the outsider. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I got. Why didn't I say more? Why didn't I really let them have it? But then I realized, no matter what I said, it wouldn't have made a difference. It was like talking to a brick wall. They had their version of events, and I had mine. Those two things were never going to match up. I ended up at a park I used to hang out in as a kid. There was an old bench kind of hidden in the corner by some trees. One of those places you go when you just need to get away from everything. I sat down, leaning against the cold wood, and just stared up at the sky. It was a clear night, full of stars. Normally, I'd find it calming. Not tonight. All I could think about was how unfair everything was. How I'd spent my whole life trying to measure up, only to be left with scraps while my siblings were given everything. My phone buzzed. For a second, I debated ignoring it. But curiosity got the best of me. It was a text from Emily. Michael, where did you go? You need to come back. Let's talk about this. Talk? Yeah, right. I'd heard that before. Talking never fixed anything in my family. It was always the same old story. Mom and Dad explaining why things were the way they were, and me being told to just accept it. But this time, I was in the mood for more excuses. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to deal with Emily. Not yet. I kicked a rock with my foot, watching it roll across the playground. I couldn't stay out there forever, even though the idea of never going back to that house was tempting. Eventually, I'd have to figure out what I was going to do. But for now, I just needed to be alone. I don't know how long I sat there, but the cold started to creep in. Fall was just around the corner, nights getting chillier. I pulled my jacket tighter, feeling the wind cut through the thin fabric. I thought about heading home, but the idea of walking back into that house, facing them after everything? Unbearable. My phone buzzed again. This time, a call. Emily. Her name flashed across the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part wondered, maybe this time, she actually gets it? I hesitated, then swiped to answer. Michael, where are you? Emily's voice came through, calm, but with that usual hint of superiority that always grated on my nerves. Doesn't matter. I replied, my voice flat. I'm not coming back tonight. Come on, you're being ridiculous. We're family. We need to talk this out, she said like it was that simple. Talk. I let out a bitter laugh. You mean like we always do? Where I get told why I should be grateful for what little I get, and you all pat yourselves on the back for being such great siblings. That's not fair, she shot back. We didn't know you felt like this. How could you not know? I snapped, my frustration rising again. Every time we sit down as a family, it's all about you, Sarah and Chris. You get the trips, the houses, the weddings, and I get left with whatever's left over. I'm sick of pretending it doesn't bother me. Silence. I could almost hear her trying to come up with something. Look, maybe we haven't seen things from your perspective, Emily finally said, her voice softer. But running away like this isn't going to solve anything. This isn't about tonight, Emily, I said, rubbing my temples. This is about every time I've been left out. Every time you guys got to live your best lives while I was stuck trying to make ends meet. I needed help too. And all I got was a toolbox. She didn't say anything for a while. I could hear faint sounds of the house in the background, laughter, dishes clinking. Like nothing had even happened. Like I didn't matter. Just come back, she said eventually. We'll figure it out, okay? But I wasn't ready to figure anything out. Not with them. Not yet. I need time, I said, hanging up and shoving my phone back in my pocket. I leaned back on the bench, staring at the stars again. It was going to take more than just a conversation to fix this. They didn't understand, and maybe they never would. But at least for tonight, I wasn't going to be the one sitting quietly pretending everything was okay. I didn't sleep much that night. When I got back to my apartment, my mind was still racing. The weight of everything sat heavy on my chest. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over. How had it gotten to this point? How could my own family be so blind to what I'd been dealing with for years? I mean, I get it, they were busy with their own lives. But was it really that hard to see how unfair things had been? As the hours ticked by, I started thinking deeper. Not just about dinner, but everything that led up to it. All the years of being left out, all the moments I'd brushed off as no big deal that had actually been building up. This wasn't a one-time thing. This had been going on my entire life. It wasn't just about the money, though that hurt. It was about how I'd been treated. How I'd always. To figure things out on my own. And honestly, it wasn't even like I wanted their help. I just wanted them to see me, to acknowledge that I existed, and that my life mattered just as much as Sarah been the one who had to fend for himself, while they were taken care of. I was the one who had H's and Chris's. As I lay there, staring into the darkness, I realized something else. I wasn't angry anymore. I was still frustrated, but the fire I'd felt earlier had simmered down. Instead, I felt this deep sense of exhaustion. Like I was just tired of it all. Tired of trying to fight for a place in a family that seemed to have decided long ago that I wasn't worth the same attention as my siblings. I don't know what time I finally fell asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, everything felt a little clearer. Not easier, just clearer. I knew nothing was going to change unless I made a change. They weren't going to suddenly wake up and realize how unfair they'd been. It was up to me to make them see it. The problem was how. I wasn't even sure where to start. Part of me wanted to just cut ties completely, walk away. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. Messed up as things were, they were still my family. I didn't want to walk away entirely. I just wanted things to be different. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring out the window at the empty street. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times I'd tried to bring these issues up before. How I'd hinted at the unfairness, only to be brushed off or told I was overreacting. But I wasn't. I just never had the chance to truly lay it all out for them. That's when it hit me. The only way they were going to understand was if I showed them. Plain and simple. I needed to spell it out in a way they couldn't ignore or argue against. Numbers don't lie, right? I wasn't sure if they'd listen, but at least they wouldn't be able to dismiss me as dramatic or jealous like they had so many times before. I spent the rest of the morning digging through old files, emails, bank statements, anything that could help me make my point. I had receipts for the tools my parents helped me buy, but I also knew they'd help Sarah and Chris with so much more. I started putting everything together, organizing it all into neat little piles that told the story I'd been trying to tell for years. It wasn't easy. Going through those old documents was like ripping open old wounds. I found an email where my parents had promised Sarah money for a down payment on her house. Then I found texts from my dad saying they couldn't really help me with rent because they'd already given a lot to Sarah that year. It stung. It really stung.
But it also motivated me.
This wasn't just in my head. I had the proof. As I worked, my phone buzzed a few times. More texts from Emily, probably still trying to get me to talk it out. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to talk. I needed to be prepared first. I wasn't there yet. I ended up working all day. By the time I finished putting everything together, it was late afternoon. I was drained, mentally and emotionally.
But I had something solid now.
Something I could take to them and say, "Look, this is what I've been dealing with. This is why I'm upset." It felt like a weird kind of victory. Not happy, more like, okay, now they have to listen. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew they'd probably get defensive, especially Sarah. She always acted like she was entitled to everything.
But I was ready for that now.
I leaned back in my chair, staring at the pile of papers in front of me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't just sitting back and letting things happen to me anymore. I was taking charge. Now, all that was left was to decide when and how to confront them. I didn't want to do it over the phone or through texts. This needed to be face-to-face. But the thought of sitting down with all of them again, after what happened at dinner, made my stomach turn. It was going to be awkward as hell. But it had to be done. I knew they were planning another family dinner soon, something for Emily's birthday. The timing wasn't great. Who wants to ruin a birthday? But honestly, when was there ever a good time to bring this up? There wasn't. And I wasn't about to wait around for another year, hoping things would magically get better. So that was it. I'd confront them at Emily's birthday dinner. It wasn't going to be pleasant, and it definitely wasn't going to be easy. But it was time to stop pretending like everything was fine. When the day of Emily's birthday dinner rolled around, I was a wreck of nerves. I had everything ready. Every document, every piece of evidence that showed just how much my parents had favored Sarah and Chris over me. But knowing I was about to walk into a situation that was going to be awkward, uncomfortable, and probably end with a lot of yelling didn't sit right with me. I wasn't trying to ruin Emily's birthday, but there wasn't exactly a perfect moment to do this. It had to happen, and it had to happen soon. I got to my parents' house a little early, probably to give myself time to calm my nerves. When I walked in, everything seemed normal, like nothing had happened a few nights ago at that disaster of a family dinner. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on dinner. Dad was out back, grilling, like he always did when the weather was nice. Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to what was about to go down. She looked up when she saw me and gave me a smile. "Hey, Michael, you good?" she asked, like everything was fine between us. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't fine, though. My heart was racing, and I could feel the folder full of documents tucked under my arm, burning a hole through my shirt. But I had to keep it together. Sarah and Chris showed up not long after, laughing and chatting like they hadn't noticed anything wrong either. It was amazing how easily they just moved on from things.
Me?
I'd been carrying the weight of all this crap for years, and it was finally about to explode. We sat down to eat, and for the first 20 minutes or so, it was the same as always. Mom asked about work. Sarah talked about some upcoming vacation with her husband. Chris made a joke about how he still couldn't believe how expensive weddings were. I sat there, barely touching my food, waiting for the right moment. Then it came. After we'd finished eating and everyone was settling into dessert, I put my fork down and cleared my throat. "I need to talk to you all," I said, my voice sounding way more confident than I felt. Everyone looked up at me, confused. Dad raised an eyebrow. "What's up, Michael?" I took a deep breath and opened the folder, pulling out the first set of documents. I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other night, and I realized that I've never really laid it all out for you guys. I've been carrying this around for years, and it's time I showed you why I feel the way I do. Mom looked concerned, glancing at the folder. "Michael, can't we just enjoy the evening? It's Emily's birthday." "I know," I interrupted, trying not to let her guilt me into backing down. And I'm sorry, but there's never going to be a good time to do this. I need you all to listen. I stood up and walked over to the living room, hooking my laptop up to the TV. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I clicked through the folders on my desktop, pulling up the presentation I'd spent days putting together. It wasn't fancy, just a slideshow with numbers, dates, and pictures of the documents I'd gathered. The first slide was simple, a chart comparing how much my parents had spent on each of us for education. Sarah's name was at the top, followed by Chris, then Emily. My name sat at the bottom, with a number that was embarrassingly low compared to the rest. "What's this?" Chris asked, leaning forward on the couch. "This is what I've been dealing with," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my hands were shaking. "This is how much you spent on Sarah's college tuition. And this," I clicked to the next slide, "is how much you spent on Chris's graduate degree. And here's Emily's. All her student loans covered." I paused, letting the numbers sink in. Sarah and Chris exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything yet. "And this," I said, clicking to the final slide, "is how much you gave me. $7,000 for tools. That's it. No tuition help. No house down payment. No wedding fund. Just $7,000. The room was silent. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they processed the numbers. Mom looked like she was about to cry, and Dad was frowning, clearly not happy with where this was going. "Michael," Mom started, but I cut her off. "I'm not saying you didn't help me," I said, trying to stay calm. "But you can't sit there and tell me this is fair. Look at the difference. You gave them everything they needed to get ahead, and I got leftovers." Dad sighed and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "We gave you what we thought you needed, Michael," he said, his voice slow and careful. "You didn't ask for help with school." I blinked at him, not sure if he was serious. "Dad, I didn't ask for help because every time I tried, I was told there wasn't any money left, or that you'd already done enough for me. What was the point of asking if I knew what the answer was going to be?" Mom jumped in then, her voice softer, almost pleading. "Michael, we did what we thought was fair, based on what each of you needed at the time. Maybe we didn't realize the gap was so big, but we were trying to do our best." I shook my head, rubbing my temples. "It's not just about the money, Mom. It's about how I've been made to feel like the odd one out my entire life. You guys were so wrapped up in making sure Sarah and Chris were taken care of that you didn't even notice I was struggling. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was just asking to be seen." The room fell silent again, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could tell my parents were processing it, trying to figure out how to respond. Dad let out a long sigh, looking older than I remembered. "Michael, we never wanted to make you feel like you didn't matter. We love you, you know that, right?" I nodded, but it felt hollow. "I know you love me, but love isn't just about words. It's about actions. And your actions have made it pretty clear where your priorities were." Mom wiped at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Michael. We really didn't." I could feel my anger starting to fade, replaced by a dull ache in my chest. I wasn't looking to hurt them either. I just wanted things to be different. I wanted them to understand how much this had affected me. And I wasn't sure if they fully did, but at least the conversation was happening. That was something, right? Sarah cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "I think we need to figure out a way to make this right. It's not fair that Michael's been left out, and we can't just ignore that." Chris nodded, though he still didn't look happy about it. "Yeah, maybe we can figure something out." Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. For the first time in a long, long time, it felt like we were all on the same page. Or, at least heading in the right direction. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. This wasn't going to fix everything. Years of feeling like the forgotten one weren't going to disappear overnight. But maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something better. After that tense family dinner, I told my parents and siblings that I'd had enough. I was done being the afterthought, done being the one who always had to accept less while they got more. I remember sitting there, telling them I planned on talking to the rest of the family about it. I was curious if anyone else had ever noticed how I'd been treated. That's when my dad, of all people, turned to me with this cold look. Michael, you should just be happy with what you got, he said. If you don't like it, then maybe you should leave. That hit hard. I mean, I always knew where I stood, but hearing it so bluntly like that, it felt like the last nail in the coffin.
So I did exactly what he said.
I left. Not just that night, but for good. From that point on, I decided to focus on me. I had wasted too much time trying to get their approval, trying to make them see me as an equal. It wasn't worth it anymore. I threw myself into my work, into building the life I wanted without them weighing me down. I knew I had potential, and I wasn't going to let their lack of support hold me back any longer. It wasn't easy at first. Walking away from your family isn't something you can just do without feeling some guilt. But the more I distanced myself, the more I realized how much energy I'd been pouring into trying to win their approval. I started to focus on my career, putting in the hours, really grinding. And guess what? It paid off. A few years went by, and my life completely turned around. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My work was going better than I ever could have imagined. I started small, just trying to make ends meet, but eventually I grew my business to the point where I was hiring employees, building a full team. The satisfaction of knowing I'd built it all on my own was something I'd never felt before. And here's the thing, I didn't just get by.
I did really well.
The kind of success that made me look back at all those times I felt like I wasn't good enough and just laugh. I had clients coming in from all over. I was making connections I never thought I'd have. I guess, in a weird way, walking away from my family pushed me to prove that I could make something of myself without their help. But just as I was settling into this new phase of my life, I got a call. It was from my mom, which surprised me because we hadn't talked much since I left. My phone buzzed, her name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but something in me decided to pick up. Michael, we need to meet, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. There was something in her tone I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual "we need to talk" guilt trip I'd gotten used to. It sounded desperate. I hesitated. Meeting with them wasn't something I really wanted to do, but curiosity got the better of me. So, after some back and forth, we agreed to meet at a cafe. When I walked in, they were already sitting at a small table near the window. They looked different. Tired. Older. My dad, who always had this confident, almost arrogant posture, was slouched in his chair, looking more worn out than I'd ever seen him. Mom had dark circles under her eyes, and she kept fidgeting with her cup, which wasn't like her at all. Something was off. "Thanks for coming," my mom said as I sat down. I didn't say much, just nodded, waiting for them to get to the point. After a moment of awkward silence, my dad finally spoke up. "Your siblings, they've cut contact with us," he said, his voice quieter than I expected. I blinked, not sure if I'd heard him right. "What do you mean?" "They don't talk to us anymore," my mom chimed in, her voice shaky. "Sarah moved away with her husband, and she won't return our calls. Chris, he's distanced himself too. And Emily, well, we haven't heard from her in months." I sat there, trying to process what they were saying. It was hard to believe, honestly. Sarah, Chris, and Emily, they had always been the golden children, the ones who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Now, they were the ones who had walked away. "We're struggling, Michael," my mom continued. "Without them, we're really struggling. Financially, emotionally, everything." There it was. The real reason they wanted to meet. They needed help. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside me. A part of me felt like this was some kind of twisted karma. They had pushed me aside for years, ignored me when I needed support, and now they were the ones coming to me for help. The irony wasn't lost on me. But at the same time, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I wasn't sitting there thinking, this is what you deserve. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of all the drama, the years of resentment, the constant need to prove myself. "So, what exactly do you want from me?" I finally asked, keeping my voice steady. "We were hoping you could help us out," my dad said, avoiding eye contact. We know things haven't been great between us, but we're really in a tough spot financially, especially. There it was. The money. I should have seen it coming. I looked between the two of them, wondering if they had any idea how ridiculous this all was. The same parents who had told me to be happy with what I got were now asking me for help because their golden children had ditched them. I don't know, I said, honestly. I mean, you made it pretty clear a few years ago that I wasn't your priority. And now you're asking me to help you because Sarah and Chris don't want to. They looked at each other, and for a moment, I saw something in their faces that I hadn't seen before. Regret. Real, genuine regret. We know we messed up, Michael, my mom said softly. We should have treated you better. We didn't realize it until it was too late. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive them, to be the bigger person. But another part of me, the part that had spent years feeling overlooked and undervalued, wasn't ready to let go of all that hurt. I'll think about it, I said, standing up to leave. But I'm not making any promises. As I walked out of the cafe, I realized something. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. What would you have done in my situation? Could you forgive years of emotional neglect and financial favoritism, especially when your family only reaches out once they need something? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.